Hello everyone, my name is Cliff and welcome back to my channel. This is Cliff's Dark Gems. Today we're going to be doing a wrap-up of my Folklore February reading. This was a readathon created by Kat from Kat's Novel Adventures. Please stay tuned. Okay everyone, for the first prompt I've been asked to read a folk tale, and I've chosen Lion and Jackal, a little African folk tale. Now there are different variations of the Lion and the Jackal going around. One is very kids friendly and one not so much. Actually one is quite cruel and is very dark. First let me just give you a brief synopsis of the kids friendly one. The jackal is running through the bushveld and he's hunting. And he comes across a lion and he knows he's about to get eaten. So he starts crying, "Oh no, oh Mr. Lion, the mountains around us are about to fall. The rocks are going to fall on our head and we're going to die." And the lion buys the story and says, "I want to prove how strong and how big and how tough I am." So he holds up this giant rock above his head to show how tough he is. And the jackal says, "Okay, I'll quickly just place it in place there and I'll run and get some help." And he runs away. And of course he doesn't come back. End of story. The jackal wins. The second story is a little bit darker. The lion and the jackal meet up in the bush, and the jackal makes a deal with the lion. And the lion is big and strong and he's a better hunter. So while the lion goes out and hunts, the jackal will take all the food and make sure it's prepared by Mrs. Jackal and the babies and the kids, and make sure the lion and the lioness and the cubs get enough to eat as well. This does not go to plan. The jackal hides up in a cliff top and has all the meat to himself and his family, and just feeds the lion some scraps, leaving them basically dead, starving. The lion comes back, he's manipulated with, he is toyed with, he is deceived, and by the end of the story he is badly battered and bruised. He's left literally hanging off the cliff and dropped, bones broken, and eventually he is killed. Hooray for the jackal! So as you can see, these are two very, very, very different stories. I had a lot of fun reading them, but that was prompt number one. Okay everyone, just a warning that really there are very few of these stories that have a happy ever after endings. And even this story by Hans Christian Andersen, called The Steadfast Tin Soldier, has a quite tragic ending as well. It's to do with a little tin soldier, the toy, and he only has one leg because the toy maker ran out of tin, and so he was left legless while all his mates had legs. And they're in this toy room with children, and on the other side of the room is this paper castle, and there is this beautiful paper ballerina. Now the tin soldier falls in love with the ballerina and can't stop staring at her, thinking she's perfect. And the reason for that is her leg is high in the air, doing that dance, I'm not sure what it's called, that ballets do. And basically he falls in love with her. But this goblin appears and says, "Keep your eyes away from her, otherwise something bad's going to happen to you." The tin soldier is steadfast and ignores him. The next morning the window is open. He blows out the window, lands in the street below, and then he has a series of adventures where he goes down a paper boat down this little stream on the road because it's raining. He nearly gets eaten by, or he nearly gets stopped by this giant water rat, and then he gets swallowed by a fish. And somehow he finds himself back at that house because the fish is cut open, and there's a tin soldier, and he goes back into the toy room. Unfortunately, and there's no explanation for what this boy does, he throws the tin soldier into the oven. And what happens is the ballerina, a breath of wind, she joins him in the oven. And they're both burned to death. And they're just basically charred by the end of the story. So I was going, I thought these sort of stories were happily ever after. apparently not. Okay everyone, the third prompt is read a Grimm's fairy tale. I've chosen The Wolf and the Seven Kids. Now, a goat needs to go and find food for her family, her 7 children who she loves very much. And she tells them, beware of the wolf, because if the wolf comes knocking at the door and you let him in, he's going to eat you all up. And she says the way to not be deceived is, if the wolf says, I am your mother, listen for the voice. If it is a gruff voice, then it will be the wolf and not me, because I have a gentle voice. The second thing is, look out for the black paw. I don't have a black paw. So the mother goes off to fetch food, and sure enough, the wolf arrives at the door, and the kids listen to the knock, and the wolf says, let me in, I'm your mother. And they notice his gruff voice, and so they send him away. He goes away and disguises his voice and comes back. At this time he puts his hand on the windowsill, and it is a black paw. So the children send him away a second time. Now for the third time, in total disguise, the wolf knocks on the door and the little kids let the wolf in. And they hide because they can see that this is a wolf. But the wolf finds all of them except for the little one and swallows them all whole and runs off and takes a little nap next to the river. The mother comes home and finds a terrible sight. But the little one jumps out of the hiding place and tells the mother what has happened. So the mother takes a pair of scissors and takes a needle and thread and says to the little one, follow me. They go find the wolf, and the wolf is deeply asleep. And the mother opens up his stomach with the scissors. And all the kids jump out. The children jump out and they're whole and they're unharmed. And the mother replaces the children with rocks inside the wolf's stomach and then sews him up. The wolf wakes up and feels a little bit funny, as if he hasn't eaten, but I've eaten 6 kids, and goes to have a drink by the well. But while he's leaning over, he loses his balance and he falls in and he drowns. Hooray! Okay, now all of the Grimm's fairy tales are very, very dark. This is probably one of the more family-friendly, children-friendly ones that I've actually chosen here. So you can imagine what happens in some of those other tales. That was number 3. Prompt number 4 was read a fable. Now I chose one of my favourite authors from when I was a children. It's Rudyard Kipling with his Just So stories. And the one I chose was How the Elephant Got Its Trunk. Now this is a very entertaining little tale. I would have loved to read this, but it is too long. Same as some of the other ones. So let me just give you a brief synopsis. Basically a little elephant, back in a long time ago, all the elephants only had little normal noses, little stub noses. And there was one curious little elephant that wanted to find out from all the animals, including his family, what it is that crocodiles eat for dinner. And everywhere he went, he asked a question. And the adults beat him, because he was being impertinent, and he was being too curious. And he kept asking, and he kept getting beaten by all these animals. But still he was determined, and he found himself down by the river's edge. And he poked his nose over and asked the crocodile, what do you eat for dinner? And he poked his nose over a little bit further. The crocodile grabbed his nose and began to pull. And soon there was a bit of a tug-of-war game between the two of them. There was a huge snake nearby that actually helped the little elephant. And eventually they got away from the crocodile, but the nose was a trunk. Now little guy finds out that this trunk is very, very useful for grabbing fruit off the trees, for swatting himself, for cooling himself off with mud and throwing it over his body. And he goes back to show everyone what's happened to him. And on the way back he beats everyone senseless that has beaten him, because now he's got a trunk, including his family. The end. How the Elephant Got Its Trunk. Okay, next up for number 5 we are looking at a retelling of a fairy tale. And I've chosen Neil Gaiman's retelling of Snow White, and he calls it Snow, Glass and Apples. And this is taken from Smoke and Mirrors. Now, This takes the whole story of Snow White and completely turns it on its head. Whereas the wicked stepmother is not a wicked stepmother. She's actually a good mother, a good stepmother, and Snow White is an evil, murderous creature. I want to read you just a tiny paragraph taken from the story, just to give you an idea. One night, several months after I was brought to the palace, she came to my rooms. She was 6. I was embroidering by lamplight, squinting my eyes against a lamp smoke and fitful illumination. When I looked up, she was there. Princess, she said nothing. Her eyes were black as coal, black as her hair. Her lips were redder than blood. She looked up at me and smiled. Her teeth seemed sharp, even then in the lamplight. What are you doing away from your room? I'm hungry, she said, like any child. A little bit later, the little princess fastened her mouth to my hand and licked and sucked and drank. I shrieked. I began to shriek from pain and from surprise, but she looked at me and I fell silent. A very, very delightful retelling of Snow White. Okay, for prompt number 6, I had to read a fractured rhyme. And I chose a couple of rhymes from Roald Dahl's Revolting Rhymes. I would have loved to read one of these, but unfortunately Roald Dahl's name is still not in the public domain, so I didn't know whether that was allowed or not. But I would strongly advise getting your hands on some. They are absolutely hilarious. Some of my favourites are Red Riding Hood, Little Miss Red Riding Hood, and the Three Little Pigs. And they actually come after one another in the book because they are hysterically linked at the end of each of those stories. And I'm going to put a couple of images up here just to give you an idea of the feel for these stories. Really, truly, they're just hysterical and they're funny. And they're just as funny for adults as for kids. Okay, next I had to take folk tales and fairy tales from another country for number 7. And for this I chose this book that I own, Folk and Fairy Tales from Bohemia. And I'd just like to read the inside of the jacket for you. No book of fairy tales is complete without its magic spells, enchanted castles, secret potions, bewitched princesses, and deeds of daring. But in this collection of tales from Bohemia, the familiar strains of fantasy are mixed with unusual touches of the humorous and the bizarre. In these stories you will meet the old childless couple who are given a hedgehog for a son, the magic whistle which can summon birds, animals and fish, the fiddle whose music is so spellbinding that whoever hears it must dance, and a white goose which turns into a beautiful girl. You will read of the 12 brothers' adventures when they find a magic castle and meet the 12 enchanted princesses, the dog Toby who tricks the wolf, and the clever cobbler who manages to outwit the devil. There is a story of the prince who finds a greyhound and a magic pouch, and the story of a blacksmith who works hard for a strange reward. The full colour illustrations and line drawings are by the famous Czech artist, the late Julie Trinka. These traditional favourites of Czech and Moravian storytellers have been virtually unknown until now in this country, and their translation and retelling are done with great skill and charm. Okay, from this particular book I chose a little tale called The Three Brothers. Now the three brothers become very skilled at forestry, and they are sent out into the world beyond the boundaries of their land to make their fortunes. 2 of them end up being trapped and turned into stone by an evil old hag, evil old witch, and it's up to the 3rd brother to find them and to rescue them, and not just them but all the other adventurers from that dark side of the forest that have been trapped by this evil witch. He destroys the witch, he rescues everyone, they go back to this castle and they live happily ever after. So for once, everyone, we have a happily ever after. Okay, now everyone, number 8, my final prompt was to make or to watch a movie based on a fairy tale or a fairy tale retelling or anything. I did say that I was going to try and rewatch either Puss in Boots or A Tale of Two Sisters. Excuse me. I didn't do either, but I would strongly recommend, if you enjoy your horror, to watch A Tale of Two Sisters. It's absolutely terrifying. Okay everyone, so that was my wrap up of the Folktale February readathon. Thanks so much to Kat for organising this. I'll leave a link in the channel description below, and I've had a lot of fun. I hope you have too. Please like and subscribe, and please put a comment down in that space down there below. And until next time, take care of yourselves, keep those pages turning. Cheers.